Now, last week I brought you a story about a Tennessee school district that was requiring parents to sign a form saying that they would not eavesdrop on the virtual lessons that their children were taking in schools. The school district tried to paint this as a way to protect student privacy. Students might say things in class, and we don't want that getting back to parents. But I think we all know that that's kind of nonsense. School districts are now terrified that parents are going to see exactly what their children are being taught in schools. And what that is they're being indoctrinated to be little activists for the Black Lives Matter movement. They're not being taught things like English and spelling and math, or if they are being taught math, it's like weird 2 + 2 = 5 math. It's absolutely insane what's going on in these school districts. And for my money, this is actually one of the most concerning things to me about how social justice and critical race theory and these Black Lives Matter curriculums that have happened that are taking over our school districts. In many of these school districts, and I presented an example in the video on Friday to say this, Black Lives Matter is actually working with the school district to make sure their curriculum is implemented in schools. Now, for those of you who are new to my channel, there is a distinction between Black Lives Matter, the saying, and Black Lives Matter, the organization. If you're just talking about, do Black people matter? Of course they matter. You have no issue with me in regards to that statement. If someone says, Carlin, do you think Black Lives Matter? I will say yes every single day of the week. I'm not going to do this thing where I'm going to play around with the language and say, well, all lives matter. I'm not going to do that because I think there is value in focusing specifically on the struggles that African American men and women have in our society. I just think that's true. And I think we can do that in a way that is not antagonistic. And I think all lives matter sometimes, frankly, can get a little antagonistic unnecessarily. So if you just said to me, do you think Black Lives Matter? I'm going to say yes. If you said to me, do you support Black Lives Matter, the organization that has gotten, what is it, like $500 million, $1 billion of donations since George Floyd was murdered? If you ask me if I support that organization, I'm going to say no. Absolutely, I do not support that organization. The reason I don't support it is because the founders of it have self-proclaimed, you can find the videos on the internet, that they are trained Marxists, and I do not support Marxism. It's really that simple. But now Black Lives Matter is using this giant treasure trove of resources that they have been given to infiltrate the school systems even more than they already have so that kids, very, very young kids, we're talking 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, are learning from the time they're in elementary school to be little activists. And when you teach kids something this early in their lives, listen, our worldview is pretty cemented by the time we are 8 years old. 8 years old. It's not that it can't change after that, it is just incredibly hard to change it after that, right? So if teachers get to these kids early, they are putting ideas in their heads that are going to literally follow them around the rest of their lives, regardless of if they're true, regardless of if they're valid, regardless of if it's going to create a better, more fair, more just, more equal society. None of those things matter to these people. It is about power and it is about control. And I'm going to prove it because, listen, around the same time, I read this article from Mel Magazine, and I'm going to read the whole thing in this video and we're going to react to it. It's called "The Kids Are Alt-Right When Your Star Pupil Gets Red-Pilled." What this article is about is teachers teaching these students, the same ones that don't want parents looking at what their kids are learning. What they're saying is they feel a personal sense of failure when these kids do not buy into the indoctrination. And this article is insane. We're going to read the whole thing. We're going to talk about it. But before we get into that, folks, I'm trying to grow the channel. I'm so close to meeting my goal of 100,000 subs before Election Day. If you like the content I'm producing, please consider subscribing, giving it a thumbs up, turning on those notifications, all that good stuff. I greatly appreciate it. All right, let's read this article. Teachers know the warning signs when students are radicalized by online hate movements. They just don't know how to stop it, or if it's a power struggle, they can ever win. So you're going to see throughout this article, they are taking something that is essentially students saying, no, I don't agree with crazy Marxist ideas that you're teaching us. And they're essentially saying if the students are not buying into what they're being taught, either because their parents are teaching them actual like reality or what have you, they're saying that these kids are members of online hate groups if they do not buy into what the teachers are teaching them. Olivia, a 34-year-old teacher in Kentucky, had the great displeasure of watching one of her 14-year-old students become radicalized online. He went from a sweet kid to a year later tweeting that if homosexuals weren't willing to change their ways, they should be killed. And then she says, and then started tweeting about Black Lives Matter, immigrants, liberals, feminism, and anything else he could get his hands on. This was a kid that was generally kind and quiet, but he began following far-right figures on Twitter, and the rest is history. Now, let's just be very clear. I do not condone anyone of any age tweeting that homosexuals should be killed if they don't change their ways, obviously. But the reality is that most people on the right wouldn't condone that either. It's been fascinating to watch what happened in the past couple days when the RNC announced their convention speakers. There was a movement on Twitter of grassroots people on the right or conservatives or MAGA people demanding that more LGBT voices be heard. I saw so many requests, and frankly, full disclosure, I put it out there too. So many people demanding that Brandon Strauch from Walkaway be featured at the convention, demanding that Scott Pressler be featured at the convention. Both gay men, both working their butts off to help Donald Trump win in November. Well, Brandon's more so trying to get people out of the Democratic Party, but same essential purpose, isn't it? Let's keep going. Jennifer, a 30-year-old teacher in Arizona, had a similar experience. She had one student in the 3rd grade who was a flat earther, and again, I don't condone flat earth either, and said he'd raised this and other conspiracy theories about vaccines and Illuminati in schools. He'd tell my class that the earth is flat during our gravity lessons, and it was so difficult to explain to him that it can't be true. He'd repeatedly tell me that I'm wrong and try to derail the class. He questioned me in front of a lot of kids as if he was testing my authority as a teacher. Listen, if you can't control a 3rd grader, you need to go get some more training, dude, for real. He continued his mission outside of the classroom too, sharing conspiracy theories from YouTube and other students during recess. So what this article is already trying to do, and you're going to see how it develops, is it's trying to paint everyone, every single person who does not buy into this far left ideology as crazy. I'm not a flat earther. I think that's stupid. I think that vaccines have value. I'm a little iffy about what would happen with a new coronavirus vaccine and if everyone should be forced to take it. That's a different subject, but that's more has to do with making sure it's tested and safe to do rather than a vaccine issue. But there are a lot of reasons to oppose what's going on the right that are not these conspiracy theories. What they're trying to do is conflate the two, to say everyone who does not agree with us are automatically these crazy conspiracy theorists. And let's just be blunt here for a second, folks. People are allowed to believe weird things. Children in classrooms are allowed to ask questions, or they should be allowed to ask questions. They should be allowed to explore these ideas. What these teachers are talking about doing is just shutting down anyone that questions what they're teaching them. Again, I don't believe the earth is flat. The earth is obviously round. I believe flat earthers are crazy and kind of silly and entertaining in a weird way, but I don't condone that at all. And I strongly believe that most people that are either independents or on the right don't condone that either. Let's keep going. The prospect of red pilling. See, this is where they start to conflate the two. They're saying, oh, if you're red pilling, you are crazy. The process of red pilling, in which a person becomes radicalized by far-right spaces online, has attracted a lot of media attention in the Trump era, amid raising concerns about political polarization and the ascent of far-right figures on platforms like YouTube. Often, the entry point for awkward or disgruntled men is the manosphere, a misogynistic online subculture that includes incels, men's rights activists, pickup artists, and men going their own way, but this tends to be a gateway to other far-right talking points too. You can red pill without being far right. What red pill means, or at least I think, I know people have different definitions of it, but how I define it is that you see what's actually going on. You see how much the media has lied to you. You are in a genuine search for the truth rather than buying into the crazy nonsense that the media is trying to sell you. And you can already see in this article how they're framing it. And remember, this is about teachers. This is about teachers being upset that students are not buying into their indoctrination. They're already framing it that everyone who doesn't buy into this is a crazy conspiracy theorist that just wants to, that is like a men's right activist and wants to keep the women down and all this stuff. And it's just absolutely insane. Grievances related to a lack of sexual or romantic partners are located in the same spaces as right-wing propaganda around the refugee crisis and trans issues. Annie Kelly, a PhD student at the University of East Anglia, who researches the impact of digital culture on the far right, told Mel in January 2019. When they're reinforced in these groups, as well as by mainstream media outlets on Facebook and YouTube, people end up buying into some of the maxims without realizing it. Generally, though, the focus tends to be on an adult individual who has been radicalized or the impact on their parents or partners. There has been less attention paid to the unique proposition of teachers who find themselves faced with radicalized students, even though they're often the first witnesses of the early warning signs of red pilling among a younger cohort. I have totally noticed the radicalization of students with the MRA stuff, says Carolyn for I don't know how to say that last name, a sexual violence prevention educator in Florida. I teach kids of all language ages, but I noticed it the most in middle school and high school boys, and it's getting worse and worse. Listen, I am a fan of the men's rights people. Men have men have different issues to deal with than women, obviously, in the world, and I think they get such a bad rap. The movie The Red Pill, oh my god, that movie was such a wake-up call about the different issues that men face that I had never actually considered, including that they never get the kids in the divorce. There are no resources for men if they are the victims of domestic abuse. That makes me sad. That should make everyone sad. And this article trying to paint all men's right activists or people that support that as people that are just like these incels that can't find a sexual partner, this is lies. This is exactly what people red pill from, is this sort of nonsense, except that it's even more scary when they're talking about children and not being able to get those kids to see the world in their way. Often, it's hard for teachers to tell whether a student is being truly red-pilled in the sense that they're being radicalized online or whether they're parroting the views they've grown up with in conservative households. Tessa, a 29-year-old in the Midwest who teaches 14 to 18-year-olds at private school for students with learning impairments, says that while many of her students simply take on the talking points and politics of their conservative parents, it's the parents that are the problem, huh? It's the parents being conservative that are the problem in the eyes of the teachers. This can make them especially ripe targets for full-blown radicalization and infatuation with far-right figures. And here's where, again, you guys are going to love this. A few start listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, which lead them to reading Jordan Peterson's books. She says, I think that Joe Rogan's ideology is the biggest threat to critical thinking in the last decade. Yes. You heard that right. We have now gone from crazy conspiracy theories to red pilling being for incels to anyone who listens to Joe Rogan's podcast or reads Jordan Peterson's books. They're the problem in the eyes of the teachers. This is why we have to read the full article, because they conflate this stuff all the time. And this is where people get these insane ideas that people like Jordan Peterson are far right, dangerous people. They're not dangerous people. They have ideas that, I mean, frankly, a lot of people who read them tend to agree with them and get a lot of value out of them. You know what? Jordan Peterson's writing about having a sense of purpose, taking on that responsibility. If there is one thing that could really, really serve this generation of kids that's out protesting and rioting every damn night because they don't have jobs, it's Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. These kids need responsibility. They're not taking it on. And because they haven't taken on responsibility, not only do they have a deeply unfulfilling life so far as my guess, quite frankly. But they're also I mean, they have nothing to build, they have nothing to do with it. It's incredibly sad. Responsibility, a purpose, a desire to build something, give something of value to the world. That's what's going to help these kids. Not being out there looting and rioting because they have no idea how to direct their energy because they're teachers. The people that were supposed to teach them this never did their job. Let's keep going. There are some obvious warning signs that a student is being red-pilled, though, like when there's a sudden and noticeable rightward shift in their views, when they specifically mention figures like Ben Shapiro, ding ding ding, and Peterson, who Olivia says her student loved, and when they use language that makes the online influence obvious, like Chad or cuck. There's always been boys who ask, don't girls just lie about rape though? Well, I mean, some do. Some absolutely do. And do we want to take those questions seriously? But increasingly, they're using language that sounds straight from Reddit, and they aren't satisfied with an answer or a statistic that I can cite. These are teenage boys who have MRA talking points. So what? What is wrong with that? I mean, just like, someone please, I don't understand. I don't understand what people have, like what issue they're taking with men's rights activists talking about men's issues. Women talk about women's issues. This is not dangerous for the most part, except when it impinges on their crazy ideology. They're extremely fixated on the idea of false accusations, and they talk a lot about women getting a lot of money by accusing men of the R word, but when pressed, they don't really know how that would happen. When teachers notice the warning signs of radicalization, difficult questions arise. Where is the line between shutting down these arguments and allowing kids to explore new ideas? And when is the right moment to intervene? You know where the line is? Do your effing job and teach them the subject matter that you are paid to teach them. Because I suspect that these questions have nothing to do with the subject matter that they actually should be teaching. If teachers stuck to the subject matters, reading, writing, math, geography, science, all these things, there is absolutely no need to address these issues. I went through 26 years of dang schooling, and I barely addressed these issues because I'm old, and this was kind of like, I went through programs that didn't do this nonsense, thank God. But there's absolutely no reason. In high school, especially in elementary school, middle school, high school, why are you teaching them this? Teach them the subjects they need to learn to survive in the real world, or at least get a basic education. This is why, side note, I know you guys don't like when I go on tangents, whatever. This is why I don't, this is reflected every single time I had to work with a young professional in the workplace. In probably the last 3 or so years, they couldn't write. They could not write. Like, I was responsible for teaching some of these kids how to write. Why didn't they learn that in school? Why didn't they learn in elementary school, middle school, high school, college? They're never teaching them the basics because they're trying to indoctrinate them with nonsense. Let's keep going. Jacob, a 28-year-old teacher in Texas, says that this can be a very delicate balance. I would never want to convert someone to being a liberal because you shouldn't be converting anyone to political ideologies. You think? But now we're going to get to the but, I betcha. Nevertheless, he's had success convincing even the alt-right kids you can spot a mile away to consider an alternative viewpoint. I'll tell my students that it's way better to err on the side of compassion than aggression. You like how they just painted everyone who doesn't buy into their crazy left-wing nonsense as not having compassion? Love it. That the root of our problems is fear, and that getting to understand how other people live makes you better. And you know who could really use this advice? People on the left that are now terrorizing people in suburban neighborhoods by rioting and protesting and burning the stuff down in their neighborhoods. That's who could learn this lesson. I tell the kids that I don't care what they think as long as they think for themselves. The trouble, Jacob says, is that when he discusses these ideas with his students that pose even the mildest challenge to the conservative orthodoxy that prevails in his region, he faces backlash from parents. You think? You think that parents don't want you teaching their kids and indoctrinating them into your ideology when they have ideas about how to raise their kids? Those are their kids, dude. They're not your kids. Once he was reported by a parent for teaching students the secular Common Era notation system, and another time he got a phone call for telling his class about religions other than Christianity. I just informed them, that's it, he said. It was just exposing them to knowledge is threatening, and even when I toe the line, I still get in trouble. Now, I strongly doubt that what this teacher did was simply inform students that other religions exist. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is what they always do. They always play like, I am just the innocent victim and I am just informing and educating, when in fact that's not what they're doing. It's not what they do at all. He says it became a difficult game of both sidesism in which secular and scientific ideas are treated as some left-wing radicalization on his part. Yeah, because this is exactly what's going on. Is he's trying to teach these kids his ideology. The parents don't like it, and he's saying, but I am just teaching them science. It is all science. That's all it is. It's science. Because that's their answer for frickin' everything. I've had to accept that from time to time. I will teach tolerance, and it will be seen as brainwashing. Okay. Tessa says that students often take on this conspiratorial mindset too. A lot of the conspiracies these students believe, like superior white genetics. Hang on, pause. It is the left that believes in this nonsense. It seems to be the left that believes that white people are responsible for everything. We see this in the Smithsonian Museum, basically saying that white people are responsible for things like schedules and time, and that black people can't possibly, adapt to these systems, and we have to get rid of schedules because it's a system of white supremacy. We see this crap all the frickin' time. Oh my god. And it's not, and again, the white supremacy is not coming from the right. It's coming from the left. It is people on the left literally saying that white people have developed the system that they are trying to impose on everyone else, and these poor minorities and oppressed groups simply cannot be expected. They come from different cultures. That's white supremacy. That's insanity. Or that being LGBTQ+ is a mental illness. No one believes this. This is a lie. This is propaganda. Take root for them specifically because they think it's a hidden truth I'm keeping from them as a teacher. They think I'm brainwashed by liberal narratives and that I'm compelled to lie to them. Well, that last one, they ain't wrong, darling. Jacob and Tessa's experience seems to be especially typical for teachers based in areas where deep conservatism is the norm. Here, the problem of students radicalizing online is often compounded at a social and institutional level, with far-right views being encouraged by parents and even other teachers. Oh my god, you mean not every teacher is insane? Oh. Jennifer's flat earth students transferred to her class in the middle of the year, so she wasn't sure how quickly the radicalization had taken place. But after he was so disruptive during lessons that she ended up scheduling a meeting with his father, and it became apparent that both he and the internet had a role to play. His dad just brushed off my concerns and implied that I was teaching the wrong things and trying to indoctrinate his son with the liberal agenda. Probably because you were. Again, let's just be clear. I don't believe in flat earth. That's crazy to me. But people are allowed to believe crazy things. They are allowed to teach their kids crazy things. It is not your job, teachers. It is not your freaking job to undo what their parents are doing. Stay out of it and teach them the subjects you are paid to teach them. I learned that he didn't regard education as something worthwhile because he said he can teach his kid better with videos that are on YouTube. There's a lot of truth to that, to be really frank. Not the crazy stuff, not the conspiratorial stuff, but I mean, honestly, there are so many sites out there, not just YouTube, but there's so many sites that have so many videos you can use to teach kids that are actually going to teach them subject matter instead of trying to indoctrinate them. It's insane. Another problem when students are red-pilled is that they attempt to convert other classmates. Red-pill students become highly argumentative and confrontational during lessons to sway the class towards their ideas. God forbid there be a discussion and an open exchange of ideas. And if these ideas, and keep in mind, we're talking about grade schoolers, right? If these ideas are so easy to disprove, then why aren't you doing it? Honestly, flat earth ideas are easy to disprove. You know how? You show them a globe. That's it. You talk about geography. You talk about how all this works. You teach them facts. It's going to be right in the dang textbook. This is not even that hard. So it seems to be that they're upset that they just aren't buying into exactly what we're telling them. They're asking questions. They're getting their classmates to ask questions. Oh my God, this is part of the learning process. This is how people grow. They consider ideas, they look at the evidence, and then they decide whether or not it's bunk. On one hand, they want to encourage the exploration of ideas in the classroom, but on others, they don't want class time to be endlessly derailed with debates about long settled science and ethical norms, like racism being bad and LGBTQ. This does not happen. Like, listen, this is what really pisses me off about articles like this. No one thinks racism is good. No one thinks racism is good. Very few people, a very small minority of people, do not believe that LGBTQ people should be able to marry whoever they want and love whoever they want. And again, look on Twitter at the response to the RNC convention speaker list. People are demanding that Brandon Strauch and Scott Pressler be added. These are both gay men. Why would they be doing that if the right was so against LGBT rights? It makes no sense. It's hard because if I disregard the manosphere of student questions, I sometimes feel like it makes other students think, she doesn't have a good answer for that. It must be true. You think? So it doesn't work to say, I won't dignify that with a response. No, you should not be saying to students who you are paid to teach that you won't dignify their question with a response. What the hell are you doing? Who the hell are you to say that to a student? It is your job to educate them. It is your job to have that response. Makes no dang sense. But if you go down the rabbit hole with them, is that serving the needs of other students? Of course, teachers are human too, and the emotional impact of being constantly challenged in the classroom can take a toll. It's so frustrating, Jennifer says about her flat earth student perpetually derailing the classroom with his conspiracies. He literally makes me feel like I was a fraud, and it didn't help that I was a new teacher at the time. This woman is complaining about a third grader. A third grader who sounds like he has an inquisitive mind asking questions. Guess what I believed when I was in third grade? I believed that Santa Claus was real. I believe the Easter Bunny was real. You think he's not going to grow out of this stuff? Come on. People believe crazy things. Even if he doesn't, people believe crazy things. They're allowed to. Why are you putting your responsibility on a third grader? How old are third graders? 8? Why are you abdicating your responsibility as a teacher because a third grader, an 8-year-old, is making you upset? When he'd tell me I was wrong and that those are the alternate oh yeah, I bet he used that word, please. I could feel my class lose their trust in me. It was a crazy power struggle for sure. You are a teacher fighting with a third grader. Do I need to say it again? 8 years old. Who is in control of that classroom? Is it you or is it the child? And if it is the child, then why are you a teacher? It can also be devastating for teachers to realize that despite their best efforts, some of their students might end up holding hateful beliefs long term, and many of them take it personally. My biggest worry is that we'll be stuck in their thinking forever and that they'll join the Proud Boys or something, Tessa says. I feel like I should be able to do a better job at teaching critical thinking skills, and they should have enough trust in me to believe that I'm telling them the truth. Honestly, she adds, it makes me feel as though I failed at my job. So this article is insane, but it tells you exactly where these teachers are coming from. These teachers want these students, again, that are children, to buy into their ideology. That's what they want. And if the children push back on them, they feel as though they have failed. Guys, if you have kids, please make sure you understand what they're learning in the classroom. I can't emphasize this enough. I have so much empathy for parents that are in this situation, and maybe you can't homeschool or don't want to for a variety of reasons, but I'm telling you, if I had kids right now, I would absolutely 100% be homeschooling. I would not trust these schools to teach my kids anything unless I could see exactly what they were teaching.